For over 120 years, the only way a club could enter the Scottish Football League was through being elected. These would come about whenever a club went under or the leagues decided to expand, with the last of these elections taking place in 2008 after the demise of Gretna. But in 2013, as the SPFL was formed after the merger of the SPL and Scottish Football League, it was agreed that there will be a playoff between the winners of the Highland League, the newly formed Lowland League, and whoever finished bottom of League 2, starting from the 2014-15 season. So, seeing as it's been 10 years since these playoffs were introduced, and with the end of the season coming up, let's go through these last 10 years and look at how these playoffs went, shall we? The first playoffs took place during the 2014-15 season and would begin with Lowland League champions Edinburgh City taking on Highland League champions Brora Rangers. The first leg would take place at Meadowbank, with City taking the lead in the 58th minute through Ortega Deniran, but Martin McLean would score in the 79th minute to keep it equal going into the second leg. At Dudgeon Park, Edinburgh would take an early lead with Ross Allam scoring after just 4 minutes, but Scott Graham would equalise for Brora again in the 63rd minute. Despite taking the lead twice through this tie, Edinburgh would miss 2 penalties in the shootout, with Stuart Kettlewell scoring the winning penalty for Brora to see them into the final. This final would see the Highlanders take on Montrose to decide the final spot in the SPFL. Brora would take the win at Dudgeon Park thanks to a Marvin Andrews own goal, but the game at Links Park would go the way of Montrose. Montrose would take the lead through Scott Johnston, but just after half-time, Colin McLean would equalise for Brora and reinstate their advantage. Montrose would then have a man advantage as Stephen Mackay would get sent off 2 minutes after the goal. Marvin Andrews would redeem himself by scoring at the right end this time in the 76th minute, and a minute later, Gary Wood would score to help Montrose retain their league status. The following season would see the return of Edinburgh City, and this time their Highland opponents would be Cove Rangers. The first leg would be played in Inverurie instead of in Cove, but this didn't faze the visitors, as a double from Ross Allam and a goal from Gordon Donaldson saw Edinburgh run out 3-0 winners. The reverse fixture at Meadowbank saw Dougie Gare extend City's advantage, and Jamie Watt would score a consolation goal near the end for Cove. Edinburgh would end up facing East Stirlingshire in the final, with East Stirlingshire having been in the bottom 3 for the last 6 seasons, with this being their third 10th place finish in that time. The first leg at Meadowbank would be an interesting affair, with Douglas Gare scoring a penalty for City before Maxwell Wright would equalise for East Stirlingshire. The second half would see a red card for both teams, with Joe and Boo sent off for City in the 77th minute and Rhys Donaldson sent off for the Shire in the 91st minute. The second leg at Ochilview would see the game defined by a red card, as Rhys Donaldson would get sent off again after conceding a penalty in the 87th minute. Gare would once again score for City, making the Capital Club the first team to be promoted via these playoffs and ending East Stirlingshire's 61-year stay in the Football League, seeing them drop into the Lowland League. The 2016-17 season would see Bucky Thistle from the Highland League take on East Kilbride of the Lowland League. The first leg at Victoria Park would see Bucky race into a 2-0 lead after half an hour, but East Kilbride would score just before half-time and equalise in the 85th minute to keep it level going into the reverse fixture. In South Lanarkshire, East Kilbride would take an early 2-goal lead through Sean Winter and João Vittoria, but an own goal from David Proctor gave Bucky some hope. This wouldn't last, as Drew Copeland was sent off for picking up 2 yellow cards, and then Chris Angus was sent off after getting a second yellow card for diving, meaning East Kilbride would advance to the final. East Kilbride would face off against Cowden Beef, who were looking to avoid 3 relegations in a row. The first leg would finish 0-0 in EK, but Central Park would see Fraser Mullen give Cowden Beef the lead before Kieran Gibbons would equalise. The game would end up being decided on penalties, and with the stock cars warming up in the background, Cowden Beef would hold their nerve and retain their league status for another season. The 2017-18 season would see the return of Cove Rangers, and this time their Lowland League opponents would be Spartans. The first leg in Inverurie would be relatively straightforward for Cove, as they would run out 4-0 winners in the first leg. Spartans would come from behind to win at Ainsley Park, but seeing as they only won 2-1, Cove were comfortably through and would face off against Cowden Beef. Cowden Beef were back in the playoffs again, and once again, the first leg would see a 0-0 draw. The second leg, however, was a bit more interesting. Harvey Swan would score an early penalty to give Cowden Beef the lead, but Mitch Megginson would score a quick double to flip the tie on its head. Harvey Swan would score again to equalise, but then Bradley Smith would score the winner for Cowden Beef in the 70th minute. The end of the game would see more drama as Paul McManus, Scott Ross and Eric Watson would all get sent off for Cove, and a brawl would take place involving both benches. Cowdenbeath were winners on the pitch, however, and would once again stay in the division for another year, whilst Cove were sent back to the Highland League. 2018-19 would see Cove go at it for a third time, with East Kilbride returning to the playoffs. Cove would take an early 2-goal lead in the first leg, but EK would get a goal back to give them some hope for the return fixture. The game in Cove, however, would see Mitch Megginson score 2 first-half goals, and Jamie Masson would score near the end to see Cove comfortably through to the final. Berwick Rangers would be Cove's opponents in the final. The English club had been in the Scottish Football League since 1951, and their time as a league club would come crashing to a halt, as after finishing on 19 points, they would be utterly demolished by Cove. The first leg at the Balmoral Stadium would see Sam Burnett, Mitch Megginson, Jamie Masson and Jordan Brown all score a goal each to give Cove a 4-0 advantage. The return fixture in Berwick would see Masson and Brown score again, with Paul McManus getting on the score sheet as well, seeing Cove win 3-0 on the day, 7-0 in aggregate, and at the third time of asking, finally get promoted to League 2, with Berwick dropping into the Lowland League. 2019-20 was set to be Kelty against Brora, with Brecon almost certainly being the club that would finish bottom of League 2. But COVID-19 would come along, and with the season being ended early, the playoffs were cancelled, keeping these 3 in place for another season. Despite a shortened season, and in the case of Brora, a 3-game season, the playoffs would return for the 2020-21 season, with those same teams mentioned previously. The first leg at Dudgeon Park would see Dylan Easton and Callum Higginbotham score to give Kelty a 2-0 lead. Whilst Brora would initially take the lead through Greg Morrison, Nathan Austin would score a hat-trick while Dylan Easton would score in stoppage time to give Kelty a comfortable 4-1 victory at New Central Park. Brecon meanwhile had been struggling for years at this point. I documented their struggles in a previous video, and many people expected Kelty to get the win. For the first leg in Kelty, Higginbotham would give the home side the lead before Jonathan Page would equalise soon after for Brecon, but Cammy Russell would strike just before half-time to give Kelty the lead once again. That game would finish 2-1, and in the return leg at Glebe Park, Michael Titzer would score in the 88th minute to win the game and ultimately the tie for Kelty, seeing them being promoted having been a junior side 5 years prior and sending Brecon into the Highland League. 2021-22 would see another former junior team in Bonnyrigg Rose take on Highland stalwarts Fraserburgh. Bonnyrigg have followed Kelty in leaving the juniors, joining the East of Scotland League, winning the league, and then quickly winning the Lowland League, whilst Fraserburgh are one of the bigger clubs from the Highland League. The first leg at New Dundas Park would see Bonnyrigg come away with a 3-1 win in front of a crowd of 1,571. Whilst Fraserburgh would win 1-0 at Belsley Park, it wasn't enough to overturn the first leg defeat and would see the Rose into the final. Their opponent would see a third appearance for Cowdenbeath in these playoffs, who, since their back-to-back appearances, had finished 6th, 4th, and then 9th before finishing bottom end of the season. 2,202 fans would attend the first leg at New Dundas Park, and it would appear it'd be third time's a charm for clubs facing Cowdenbeath, as Bonnyrigg would win 3-0 at home. The second leg at Central Park would see 2,117 fans see Bonnyrigg confirm their newly acquired league status with a 1-0 win, sending Cowdenbeath into the Lowland League and ending their run of 116 years as a Football League side. 2022-23 would see 2 more returning sides, with the Lowland League being won by Spartans, whilst the Highland League was won by Brecon City. Yes, Brecon have become the first team to have won a league after being relegated, winning the Highland League after beating Buckie at Victoria Park on the final day to finish ahead of their opponents by 2 points. Blair Henderson would score a last-minute winner for Spartans at Ainsley Park in a game that saw the Edinburgh side finish with 10 men. The game at Glebe Park would see Spartans take the lead twice, but Botti Biabi would score a winner for Brecon for them to win 3-2 on the day, but this would lead to a penalty shootout. Brecon would miss the last 2 penalties to see Spartans make it to the final. In the final, Spartans would be up against Albion Rovers from Coatbridge. Albion would score twice in the first leg at Ainsley Park, a slight issue being that one of them was into their own net, meaning the game would be decided in Coatbridge. Blair Henderson would once again prove to be Spartans' hero, with his 16th minute penalty being the deciding factor, seeing Spartans promoted and Albion relegated to the Lowland League, ending their 120-year stay in the Football League. 2023-24 saw Lowland League winners East Kilbride take on... Well, the Highland League was won by Buckie Thistle, but the SPFL had changed the rule, meaning any clubs in the league needed a bronze licence. Buckie only had an entry licence and were therefore ineligible for promotion. I made a video explaining this situation in further detail at the time, but basically, Bucky can't play. East Kilbride get a bye to the final. The final then would be competed between East Kilbride and Stranraer. The first leg would see East Kilbride take the lead before Stranraer would turn it around to take the lead themselves, but John Robertson would equalise in the 71st minute to keep the tie level going into the game at Stair Park. Stranraer would see their biggest attendance in over a decade as 1,871 fans made it into the ground for the second leg. Stranraer would take the lead just before half time, but East Kilbride would get a goal in the 76th minute, seeing the game go to extra time. Stranraer would score twice late on to guarantee their survival, whilst East Kilbride fail in the playoffs for the third time. For the 2024-25 season, East Kilbride will hope that it is fourth time lucky, whilst their Highland opponents will be Brora Rangers. I won't be able to tell you who has done what as this video goes up on the 9th of May, which is before the first leg against Club 42, who will most likely be Bonnyrigg Rose, meaning this will be the first playoff for 3 teams who have all been in this situation before. But the actual upload of this will be the 4th of May as I'm on holiday. I'm so good at planning these things, aren't I? Anyway, how do I think this will go? Surely, this time East Kilbride go up. They made the Trust Trophy semi-finals, getting knocked out by a then competent Queen's Park, and were knocked out of the Scottish Cup by Falkirk. Brora meanwhile won the league on goal difference ahead of Brecon, who by the way missed out for the second year running on goal difference, and their only competitive game against a league side was a 2-0 loss to Livingston. Bonnyrigg meanwhile were hampered this season by a 6-point deduction due to their pitch having too much of a slope. Again, something that I went more into depth with in another video. But it does seem like they may become the first club to have earned promotion and then relegation through these playoffs. So, now that I've said all that, I can't wait for Bonnyrigg to beat Brora in the final. Well, seeing as I do have time to add this, Bonnyrigg very nearly completed the Great Escape, only finishing behind Forfar on goal difference. This was after Forfar were 10 points off of safety at January, so fair play to them. Meanwhile, East Kilbride in the first leg in South Lanarkshire managed to win a 4-1 against Brora, whilst the second leg at Dudgeon Park was a rather entertaining 3-0 draw. So that confirms it will be East Kilbride against Bonnyrigg, so it'll be interesting to see how that goes. That's all for this video, and I hope you enjoyed. Who do you think will win the playoffs? As mentioned, by the time this is out, we'll be at the first leg of the final, so it'll be interesting to see. Who do you think will win in the playoffs? I've hedged my bets on East Kilbride winning this one. Let us know in the comments below. Of course, liking, sharing and subscribing are all appreciated, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.